Hello, and welcome to my tutorial. Let's start by looking at the game's interfaces and controls. To quit the tutorial, just press the B button at any time. Each player has their own display panel. There's a message box and an interface area. Here's the summary interface. This is the default interface, where you roll the dice to start your turn. As well as showing your name and money, the small window is used to show you a close-up view of the board and your token. Next is the property management interface. This important interface lets you buy or sell houses, mortgage property, or trade with other players. You can move between the summary and property management interfaces by pressing the L button. This interface is only used during an auction and allows you to place bids. To access the options on each interface, you use a highlight. This can be moved around with the control pad or control stick. To select an option or icon, just press the A button. Selecting an option, such as Trade, will bring up a separate window with another interface. All interfaces can be controlled in the same way. From time to time, you'll need to select a tick or cross icon to confirm or cancel an operation. This can be done in two ways. You can either move the highlight to the icon and press the A button, or you can use a shortcut button. The shortcut for the tick icon is the X button. The B button is used as the shortcut for the cross icon. If you need more help on what an icon or option does, just press the Z button while the icon is highlighted and a help message will be displayed. So far, we have looked at the different interfaces used while playing the game. Let's turn our attention now to board-related controls. There are a number of different camera views available to you. These can be selected by pressing the Y button. Each time the button is pressed, the game switches to the next view. Pressing Start will pause the game and bring up the in-game menu. The player who presses Start has control of this menu. Now, for one last thing. You can make your token wave to you by pressing the R button. Each token has its own different and unique way of waving. Here we are on Go. Let's start the game. At the start of each turn, you need to roll the dice. To do this, select the summary interface and press the A button. You've rolled a 6. Let's move 6 spaces forward. Remember, you always move clockwise around the board. Now that you've arrived here, there are several options available to you, but I'll talk about these later. Because you rolled a double, you get to roll the dice again. This time, you rolled a 3. Let's move another 3 spaces. Each time you roll a double, you get to roll the dice again. This is great for getting around the board quickly, but you need to watch out. If you roll 3 doubles in a row, you'll be sent to jail. Okay, time to move on. Follow me. Ah, there you are. There's one final thing I want to tell you about when moving around the board. As you can see, we're nearly back at go. Let's roll the dice again. You've rolled a 4. You probably noticed that you passed go on your way here. Every time you land on or pass go, you'll receive a salary of $200. Let's now talk about community chest and chance. When you land on one of these spaces, you'll be shown a card taken from the top of the appropriate card pile. Some of the cards are good. As we can see on this card, the bank has made an error and you collect $200. Other cards can mean bad news. This card tells you that you must pay a hospital fee of $100. This money is paid to the bank. In addition to paying fines and fees, you can also be sent to jail. Luckily, there's a get-out-of-jail-free card to offset the go-to-jail card. If you pick up this card, you can keep it. When you land in jail, you can then use the card to get out immediately without having to roll a double or pay a fine. Okay, let's now talk about the best part of the game, buying properties. When you land on a property that isn't owned by anyone, you will be asked if you want to buy it. If you do, just highlight and select the tick icon. Your cash will then be reduced by the purchase price. On the board, the property will be identified as being owned by you using your player color. There may be occasions when you don't have enough money to buy a property. In this situation, you can either decline to buy the property by highlighting and pressing the cross icon, or you can try to raise enough money by selling houses or mortgaging property. I'll explain how this is done later. If you don't have enough money to buy a property or decide that you don't want it, the property will be sent to auction. All players are allowed to take part in the auction. This means that if you want the property but don't want to pay the regular price, you may be able to buy it for less at auction. Player 2 has started the bidding with an offer of $50. To bid, all you have to do is move the highlight to the cash icon representing the amount you want to add to your bid and select it. You can only increase your bid, so be careful not to press the icon too many times. Once a bid is made, it can't be taken back. If everyone has a controller of their own, the auction will take place in real time. All players bid simultaneously during the auction. Bidding continues until no further offers are made. At this point, I will declare the auction closed, and whoever has the highest bid takes possession of the property. Going once, going twice, gone! Player 4 has won the auction with a bid of $200. You will notice that their money goes down by the amount of their bid. If you are playing the classic game where 2 or more players are sharing a controller, the auction system is slightly different. Each player takes it in turn to place a bid. Once the amount has been set, the bid is made by selecting the tick icon. If you make a mistake, you can cancel your bid by selecting the cross icon. If you wish to drop out of the auction, just select the icon with the arrow pointing down. When there is only one player left, the auction is over, and that player will buy the property for the amount they bid. Now I want to talk to you about rent. Let's assume that you have just rolled your dice and moved to this property, which is owned by player 3. When you land on a property owned by another player, you must pay the owner rent. This is done automatically, and a message is shown to each player advising them of the transaction. If a property is mortgaged, then the player landing there does not have to pay the owner any rent. The amount of rent payable depends on several factors. The more the property costs to buy, the higher the rent. If a player owns all the properties in a like color group, the rent charge for unimproved properties is doubled. An unimproved property is one without any houses or hotels built on it. The amount of rent payable also increases as more houses are built on a property. The highest rent is paid if the property has a hotel. We can see that this property has a house built on it. The title deed shows that instead of paying $10, the rent has gone up to $50. On a less pleasant note, we come to the topic of tax spaces. Follow me. As well as paying rent when you land on someone else's property, there are two nasty spaces to watch out for. The income tax space is located just after go. More than one player has made it past go and received their salary, only to find they must give the money back to the bank. If the income tax 10% rule is turned on, you'll be given the choice of paying $200 or 10% of the total value of your assets. Your asset worth is equal to the money you have, the purchase prices of all the properties you own, and the cost of the houses or hotels you have bought. If the income tax 10% rule is turned off, then there is no choice and you must pay the $200 tax. In addition to the income tax space, there is another tax space just before go. This tax is for a fixed amount and is slightly cheaper than income tax. At some point in the game, you're going to find yourself in jail. One of the ways this can happen is to land on the go to jail space, just as this token has done. As the space says, you must move directly to jail and you must not pass go or collect your salary. Once in jail, your turn is over and you must wait until your next turn before you are allowed to try to get out. On your next turn, you will be given the choice of paying a fine or rolling the dice. If you roll a double, you will be released from jail and move forward the number of spaces shown on the dice. You are allowed 3 attempts to roll a double. Alternately, by paying a $50 fine, you will be released from jail and then can roll the dice and move the number of spaces shown. If you fail to roll a double on your 3rd attempt, you must pay the $50 fine and move forward the number of spaces indicated by the dice. You can also use a get-out-of-jail-free card, if you have one. If you have such a card, the game will ask if you want to use it. Just select the tick or cross icon once you've made your decision. To summarize, as well as landing on the go-to-jail space, you can also end up in jail if you pick up one of the community chest or chance go-to-jail cards, or roll 3 consecutive doubles. To get out of jail, you can either pay a fine, roll a double, or use a get-out-of-jail-free card. A key milestone in the game is when you can start building houses on your property. Before you can do this, you must own all the properties in the color group you want to build on. To buy a house, you need to access the Property Management interface and then select the Buy House icon. This is the property grid window. This grid shows the colors of all the properties in the game. You can move the highlight around the grid using the control pad or control stick. Now you need to select the property you want to build on. You'll notice that some of the property colors have been grayed out. You can only select a property if you own all the properties in a like color group. Each time you select a property, a house will be built on it. The message box will be updated to reflect this change. In the interface box, there is a total cost amount. This shows you how much it will cost to build houses on all the properties you have selected. If you want to view the title deed card for a property, press the Z button. To close the title deed information, press the Z button again. Once you have finished selecting properties to build on, you must highlight and select the tick icon. Houses will be built on all the properties you selected and the cost deducted from your money. If you want to cancel the buying process, select the cross icon, and all changes you have made will be reversed. And that's all there is to it. The monopoly rules state that you must build evenly. This means that before you can build a second house on a property, the other properties within the color group must have at least one house built on them. Naturally, the more houses you own, the higher rental income you will receive when an opponent lands on that property. The ultimate property improvement is a hotel. This can be bought once you have 4 houses. Buying a hotel will cost the equivalent of an extra house. When purchased, the hotel will replace the 4 houses you previously owned. Selling a house is as easy as buying one. First, you need to access the property management interface. Then, move the highlight to the Sell House icon and select it. Now you can move the highlight and select the property from which you want to sell a house. As you select houses to sell, the interface box will show you how much money you will receive from the sale. When you sell a house, you only get back half the money it cost to build. Once you've selected all the houses you want to sell, move the highlight to the tick icon and select it. If you want to cancel the procedure and get the house back, you just need to select the cross icon. As with buying houses, the even build rule must be adhered to. You are not allowed to sell all the houses on one property, leaving several houses on another. There will be times when you want to purchase a property or pay a fine and don't have enough cash to do so. In these instances, you can mortgage one or more of your properties to generate some money. You can only mortgage an unimproved property. If there are any houses on the color group that the property belongs to, These must first be sold before any of the properties on that color group can be mortgaged. To start the mortgage process, you first need to access the property management interface and select the mortgage icon. You can now move the highlight around the property grid, selecting properties you own. You will remember that these are the brightly lit colors. Properties that you don't own are grayed out. As a property is highlighted, information on its name, owner, purchase price, and whether it is mortgaged will be displayed in the message box. To see the effect of mortgaging a property, just highlight its box on the grid and select it. The letter M will then be marked on the property to show it is mortgaged. You will also see the net effect figure increase as you select properties to mortgage. Keep selecting and deselecting properties to see the net effect on your cash total. Once you've worked out which properties you want to mortgage, you need to highlight and select the tick icon. This will complete the mortgaging process. If you want to cancel all the changes you have made, select the cross icon. While a property is mortgaged, you cannot receive any rent on it, nor can you build any houses. When you have some spare cash, you can repay the mortgage. However, this incurs a 10% interest penalty. The process is the same as for mortgaging. Once you've accessed the property grid, highlight and select the property you wish to repay the mortgage on. The M will be removed from the grid, and the net effect figure will show a minus value. This amount will be equal to the value of the mortgage plus 10%. Once you finish selecting mortgages to repay, highlight and select the tick icon to complete the process. As you've probably worked out for yourself, the chance of owning all the properties in a like color group is pretty slim if you have to rely on landing on and buying a property before anyone else does. This is why trading is such an important part of the game. Trading is a process whereby two or more players exchange properties and money in order to acquire other properties that are useful to them. The result will usually involve one or more players gaining a like color group. To propose a trade, you must first highlight and select the trade icon from the property management interface. The first part of this process is to select which properties are to be exchanged. Once again, a grid is used to represent the properties on the board. You'll notice that each property box has a number. This identifies who owns or will own the property. The purpose of this interface is to set up the property grid to show who will own which property once the trade has been completed. This makes it easier to set up trades between 3 or even 4 players. Let's assume that player 1 wants to trade Kentucky Avenue to player 3 for Pacific Avenue. To do this, the highlight is moved to Kentucky Avenue, which has a number 1 displayed. Selecting this property will change the number to 2. Selecting it again will change the number to 3. As soon as you change the owner of a property, a border will appear around the box to show that it has been changed. You will also see the property highlighted in the new owner's color on the game board that surrounds the trade interface. Next, we need to change the ownership of Pacific Avenue. To do this, the highlight is moved to the property's color box and selected until it shows Player 1 as the owner. We now have a grid that shows how we want the property ownership to be once we've completed the trade. You can keep on editing the grid until you are happy with it. You may select as many properties and involve as many players as you want. The game will determine from the properties that are selected how many players are involved in the trade. Next, we move on to the money interface. To do this, highlight and select the right arrow icon or press the R button. This interface is used to add money transfers to the trade deal. In our example, a straight exchange of Kentucky Avenue for Pacific Avenue is unfair, as Pacific Avenue is worth more. In this instance, Player 1 may want to offer Player 3 some money, as well as the exchange of properties. The top half of the interface is used to set up transfers. The bottom half summarizes the transfers already proposed. Let us suppose that Player 1 wants to offer $150 to Player 3. The first task is to move the highlight to the top name box and select it until Player 1's name is shown. Now we move to the second player name box and select it until Player 3's name appears. Next, the highlight is moved to the amount box and the plus icon selected until the amount shows $150. The longer you keep the icon selected, the faster the amount will change. To add this transfer to the trade deal, the Add icon must be selected. You can now see the transfer in the summary area. You'll also notice that for each player involved in the trade, a net effect figure is displayed in their interface area. This means you can see immediately whether a player is receiving or paying money as part of the overall deal. If you want to edit the deal, all you need to do is input the two players' names, and the amount of the transfer will be automatically recalled. You can then amend the amount and select the Add icon to update the money transfer summary. If 3 players are involved in a trade, up to 3 transfers can be set up. If 4 players are involved, then a maximum of 6 transfers can be made. Now we have decided which properties to trade and money to transfer. We are ready to send the proposal to Player 3. To do this, we must first move to the summary screens. Select the right arrow icon or press the R button. Each player has their own summary screen. You can move between screens using the left and right arrow icons or pressing the L and R buttons on your controller. In fact, you can cycle through all the screens, property selection, money transfer, and summary screens using these icons and buttons. The summary screen is used to bring all the trade information together in one place so you can review it before proposing the trade. If there is a lot of information to be displayed, you can use the control pad or control stick to scroll the window up or down. At the bottom of each summary screen, you'll find Propose and Cancel icons. If you want to cancel the whole deal, just select the Cancel icon. Once you are happy with the proposal, you can select the Propose icon to send the offer to the other player or players involved. Now the deal has been proposed. Player 3 must review the information and decide whether to accept it, reject it, or make a counter offer. As soon as the player who initiates the trade presses the Propose icon, control passes to the next player involved in the deal. In this case, it's player 3. The icons at the bottom of the summary screen now show the options Accept, Counter, and Reject. If player 3 doesn't like the deal and doesn't want to even consider negotiating, they can select the Reject icon and the whole deal will be canceled. If player 3 is completely happy with the offer, they can select the Accept icon and confirm that they want to go ahead. If player 3 likes the idea of the trade but isn't happy with the details, they can make a counter offer. On pressing the counter icon, the interface changes to the Select Properties interface. Player 3 can now make changes to this interface or the money interface if they so choose. Let us suppose that player 3 wants more money. They can enter player 1's and their own names and then change the amount of the transfer. Now player 3 is happy with the revised deal. They can return to the summary screens and send player 1 the counter offer. You'll notice that the Accept icon has been grayed out and that Counter and Reject icons have become Propose and Undo. If player 3 decides that they don't want to make a counter offer, they can select the Undo icon, and this will cancel the changes made. The 3 icons will then return to their original state. To make the counter offer, player 3 selects the Propose button. This sends the deal and control back to player 1. In this example, player 1 is okay with the revised deal and accepts it. As a final safeguard, before the deal is completed, each player is asked to confirm that they want to go ahead with the trade. Each player must select the tick icon in their message box to confirm. If anyone selects the cross icon, the original player must revise the deal and propose it again. And there you are. That's how the trade system works. You can also refer to your manual for further information on how to use the trade system. While futures and immunities are not part of the official Monopoly rules, many players use them as a way of sweetening a trade deal. You can turn on the futures and immunities option when creating a customized game. Let me first explain what futures and immunities are. A future is where you assign the rental income from one of your properties to another player for a limited number of times. For example, if you owned Illinois Avenue but gave a future to player 2, this would mean that if player 3 or 4 landed on this property, they would pay rent to player 2, not you. It would also mean that if you landed on your own property, you would also have to pay rent to player 2. Once player 2 has received rent 3 times, the future would be complete, and all further rent would be paid to you. Immunities are even simpler. If you grant immunity to another player, then when that player lands on the property in question, they pay no rent. As with futures, immunity is granted for a number of times a property is landed upon. Unlike futures, immunities can be granted to as many players as you want. Let us look at another example. Let us suppose that you own Boardwalk and have given immunity to players 2 and 3 for the next 3 times they land on Boardwalk. Each time player 4 lands on Boardwalk, he will have to pay you rent. The first times players 2 or 3 land on the property, they do not have to pay any rent. Now, let us take a look at how futures and immunities are set up. Futures and immunities are set up as part of the trade system. After deciding which properties to exchange and how much money to transfer, you'll be shown the Futures and Immunities interface. As you can see, it looks just like the Select Properties interface. The information shown in the property grid represents how ownership will be once the trade is completed. That is, this grid shows the final result of any changes made in the Select Properties interface. To set up a future or immunity, all you need to do is move the highlight to the property you want to deal with and select it. An overlay now appears and allows you to decide whether you want to set up a future or immunity and who should receive it. By default, the immunity option is selected, which can be changed by selecting the future icon. Next, you must decide who will benefit from the future and for how long. To do this, move to the appropriate player's name and use the plus and minus icons to set the number of times between 1 and 9. If you want to change your mind, you will need to reduce the current player's times to 0 and then increase the alternate player's value. Remember, immunities can be granted to as many people as you want. If you decide not to go ahead with the future or immunity, just select Cancel to return to the property grid. Once you're happy with the details, select the Accept icon to set up the future or immunity. This will close the overlay and update the trade deal. You will now see the letter I or F in the appropriate property grid box. Once you've set up a future or immunity for a property, you can easily make changes to it. First of all, highlight the property and select it. You can now make the changes to the details shown on the overlay. To confirm the update, you must select the Accept icon. As before, to cancel the changes and revert back to the original setup, select the Cancel icon. Once you've set up the futures and immunities, you can move on to the summary screens. In addition to showing the property and money transfers, the summary screens will also show details of any futures and immunities given or received. In this screen, we can see that Player 2 has received a future on Marvin Gardens. Well, I think that wraps up the subject of futures and immunities. As with trading, you can read more about this complicated subject in your manual. The object of the game is to become the wealthiest player through buying, renting, and selling property. The winner is the last player left in the game. So, how are players eliminated? It's a simple case of bankruptcy. When a player no longer has enough money or the means of obtaining enough money by selling houses or mortgaging property to pay a debt, they are declared bankrupt. This can happen if the player is required to pay rent to another player or a fine to the bank. A bankrupt player must retire from the game. So, what happens next? Well, this depends on who is owed the money. If the debt is to another player, all that you have of value is turned over to that player, and you retire from the game. In making this settlement, any houses or hotels must be returned to the bank in exchange for money. Any mortgaged property is also turned over to the creditor, who must immediately pay the bank 10% interest. The new owner can opt to repay the mortgage immediately or leave the property mortgaged. If the player chooses to leave the mortgage in place, they must pay 10% interest again when the mortgage is lifted. If your debt is to the bank, it will receive all of your assets. The bank will then immediately auction all properties it receives. And that concludes my Monopoly tutorial. I hope you found it useful. Don't forget, you can always repeat a section by selecting it from the tutorial menu. I have explained how the game works using the official Monopoly rules. You can customize the game with a number of different rules. You can find out more about these in the manual supplied with the game. Goodbye for now, and have fun playing Monopoly Party!